guys, how are you? I hope you're all doing very well. This afternoon I'm going to be doing a movie review, so hopefully you find this one interesting. This movie is a drama from Canada. This is spoken in the English and Indigenous language with a few English subtitles. Released in the year 2013, directed by Jeff Barnaby, and this film is called Rhymes for Young Ghouls. So Rhymes for Young Ghouls takes place in a community, a native Indigenous community, where they've been consumed by alcohol. So it's a very hopeless situation. No one in this community really has any ambitions, and it's just rife with crime and poverty. So this young girl, she's 15 years old, she's had a horrific past where her mother committed suicide and her father actually went to jail, and so she has been left with the family business of drugs, basically marijuana, and so she's had to grow up very quickly because this is the only means of money, and she's trying to work up the money in order to try and get out of this environment that's so corruptive. So when her father comes back from jail, he decides that he's going to try and get his daughter out of this business in order to just clean her up a bit. But then to further complicate matters, there is a case officer who's very sadistic and very hateful towards these people, who's going to make these their lives a living hell. So what's in store for this 15-year-old main character? Something you're going to have to find out for yourself, because that's as far as I'm going with my synopsis. Now my thoughts on Rhymes for Young Ghouls. This movie was very impressive, but I will say that it is very misleading in the way that it looks, the way that it's advertised. It kind of makes it out that this is a thriller, this is kind of like a horror film, and that does have horrifying sort of elements to it, but it's more of a drama. So go in there with the right expectations and you will come away with a movie that is very thought-provoking. It will give you something to talk about, and it will open your eyes to something that is actually happening under our noses. Now basically, Rhymes for Young Ghouls is a movie about the power of alcohol, how destructive alcohol can be, and since alcohol was, since the day it was introduced into these local Indigenous communities, how basically it's wiped out people's lives, and it's basically lives that are forgotten. It's lives that we tuck under the rug and pretend are not there. And so not only is this happening in Canada, also the Native Americans in the USA and also the Indigenous community in Australia, is that they've been decimated by alcohol. It's the power of alcohol, the corruption, and how addictive the alcohol can be, and how families are completely ruined. So this movie is a very, very sad film, but it stays away from preaching the self-righteous story. It stays away from blaming someone for this predicament. It's basically showing you the power of the alcohol without blaming, the white man. A lot of people will go out there and say that these problems are a result of the white settlements, and it does get a little bit, it does get a little bit repetitive. But this movie, it steers clear of that. It doesn't play the blame game. It's just showing you a direct situation in this community that has been ravaged by alcohol, and it's been ravaged by drugs, and basically people desperate, in desperate situations, doing desperate things and having grave consequences for that. So I think the movie does a very good job at straying away from, as I said, being a self-righteous movie, being a propaganda sort of film in that, you're blaming evil white people. A lot of other films in the past have actually done that, but this movie steers away, and that's what I really appreciated about it the most, is because it was trying to tell a story, and it was trying to give you an insight into these people's lives, and as I said, staying away from those other elements that do pollute a lot of these style of films. So I think that, the cinematography was excellent. I thought the acting from the main character was fantastic. Such a young actress, but does a great job at portraying someone who's growing up very quickly, who comes across as a tough girl, but you sense inside she's still that lost little girl. And that's the tragedy of it all, is that when you're forced to grow up so quickly, you still don't know the ways of the world. And she's only 15, and so she still has a lot of learning left to do, but she's been put into a situation as a result of her past, and that's the tragedy of the whole thing, is that she's lost her innocence, she's lost her childhood, and it's something that we take for granted at childhood, is that we grow up, we think to ourselves, okay, well, let's have fun as a child, and then we can be adults. But in this case, there are the circumstances where a person has to grow up to an adult straight away, and that's exactly what happens to this main character, and that's why you actually relate to her, that's why you actually like her, is because it doesn't paint it as just this, superwoman, Wonder Woman or something. It paints her as just this corrupted sort of child who doesn't want to grow up but has to grow up, and she's trying to escape this community that has held on to her for so long. So the pacing is very, very good, and I really like the way that the movie, it blends surrealism with reality very well. So it's a very surreal film, but it always grounds in reality, because the surreal moments take place in dream moments. So when this girl dreams, it's very surreal, it's very nightmarish, it's horrific, but that is basically the corruption of this girl. This is what this is tormenting this girl. And so without really trying, it's giving you even more depth into this woman without stopping and going into flashbacks and telling you everything that's happened. It basically just little clues that are fed in that elevate this woman, this girl, past the point of being a fuzzy face in the background. So that is what I really, really liked about this movie, and I think that it had a solid plan, and it did execute those plans very well. The soundtrack was very good, very haunting. There are scenes where she gets thrown into a boarding school, which once again were very horrific. She was treated very badly, and a lot of people were treated badly in those days when they're put into these schools, in that they're being forced to do horrible things, they're being punished for it, and they're treated as second-class citizens, and that is ultimately the biggest insult, is that these are people, these are actually natives, these are the first people of these specific lands, but they're not respected because we just deem them as alcoholics. When I say we, I say basically society in general, is that you see Indigenous people consuming a lot of alcohol and you just dismiss them as being alcoholics and nothing else. But then until you actually look at to why they're being consumed by alcohol, that's when you really open your eyes, and I think this movie does a great job at doing that without preaching it to you. So it's a very subtle way that the movie has about it, but I think it does hit you with the power of a sledgehammer. So the ending was very shocking. I really liked it. It didn't go over the top, because that would have just lost the impact of the realism. And so, it was a very neat film throughout the whole length of the runtime. But unfortunately for me, the only problem I have is that the main character is absolutely fantastic, but the rest of the characters, I thought it could have been blossomed out a little bit more, especially the father. I didn't think the father's performance was all that great. I couldn't really see too much chemistry between father and daughter. Yes, the father had been in prison for so long, and yes, that corrupts the innocence once again, and it corrupts compassion, but it just felt like there was no chemistry between the two, and yes, maybe that was deliberate, but I thought it would have been a little bit better if these other characters were a little bit more memorable, because it feels like everyone is just playing off this central character, and so it's only her that you really are interested about, but you've got other aspects of other characters that could have been a little bit interesting if they went into it just a little bit more. But having said that, it is still a very impressive film. It's a film that I would recommend to anyone out there who wants something to think about and who wants to discuss certain subjects, and so as a result of that, I'm going to give Rhymes for Young Ghouls 4 stars. Alright guys, that's it for my review. Hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching movies, and I'll see you later. Bye.